this talk this afternoon, I think, is really crucial for the weekend. And I really want to talk to you guys today, seriously, about an issue that we're having in our culture today. And I think it's something that we can all relate to. I don't think there's probably anyone in this room who's going to be like, I have no idea what you're talking about, Paul. I can't really relate to that. I think it's an issue that if we were to be real honest about today, that we can all say, hey, I agree. I'm sort of into that, or I see that, or I experience that. And my hope today for this talk is that God would begin to explode inside your heart. That the truth of God would ignite and explode inside of you. And that the truth that God has for you and for all of us would begin to move, would begin to grow, would begin to empower and just pour out of your life. I mean, that's my hope for this talk, that you would leave this afternoon, that you would leave today with a new mindset about life, with a new outlook about what you're doing with your life and the foundation that you're building your life upon. So I want to play a little game with you. It's called Real or Unreal, okay? So I'm going to pop up an image, and I want you to tell me if it's real or unreal, okay? So here's the first image. Real. Okay, that's a sponge. Very easy. All right, next image. It's very confusing for some of you, I know. All right? Let me just tell you something. And sometimes the truth is really hard to say, but SpongeBob is not real. I'm sorry. I apologize. I know for some of you, like, I just ruined your day, and you're like, what? Oh my gosh, it's like your parents just told you Santa Claus wasn't real, and you're like, wait, Santa Claus wasn't real? I understand. I know. There's some things that are just true. It's tough to hear, but SpongeBob is not real. I know some of you are like raised by SpongeBob. Your parents, you woke up in the morning, they put you on the couch, or you just kind of turned on the TV, and there was SpongeBob teaching you every word. It's not real. All right, real or unreal? Next image. All right, that's a real baby in utero. In the womb. Next, real or unreal? All right, this is unreal. It's not real. It's not a real baby. It's a real egg. It's an egg baby. It's an egg baby. Now, when I was a senior in high school, for senior project in morality class, our teacher gave us this project that everybody would get an egg, and you would dress an egg up like a baby, and your whole deal for the whole week was to carry this baby around school. It's an egg. And so you had like all the students in senior class walking around campus holding a raw egg that's dressed like a baby, and your whole deal was to protect the egg because it was a baby. So we're standing around the circle. I mean, you don't give guys eggs on campus. So we're all standing around in a circle, all my guy friends were standing around, and I'm looking at all of us, guys holding eggs that are dressed like babies. And we're all like in a circle like this. And I'm looking at this scene and I'm thinking, this is really, really awkward. These aren't real. They're not real babies, but we're acting like they are. So I look at my friend David, who's standing across from me, and we're just kind of all talking just about whatever. And so I just look at him, and just in the spur of the moment, I go, and I kicked his hand, and the egg goes, like just straight up. And he's like, and he's like, and he like lunges out to catch it. Splat, and misses it. And as soon as I did that, my friend next to me goes, and hits my egg out. He goes, and then also is like, and his eggs are flying all over the place. So I got rushed into the office, and I'm sitting down with my teacher, and she's like, "What were you thinking?" I was like, "Well, I was thinking that the egg was not a baby." And she's like, next image. Yeah. I have friends, you do too, family members, former teens of mine that I get texts from and messages from every day that say, "Pray for me. I'm in a foxhole. I am, making my rounds today. Please pray that I'll be safe." That's real. It's happening right now. You guys know that. Real or unreal? Next one. It's not real. I know. It's not real. But it seems real. You can play it, and I'm not here to knock on video games. I'm just telling you that there is a real war happening. At the same time, we could sit and we can play something that's very unreal, and it just seems real. And we can almost pretend like the real doesn't exist. You see where I'm going with this? Next image, real or unreal? Real. All right, so we're not going teams here, but those are two real men. And here's what I'm saying. We get wrapped up in our team. Here's what you don't know. Both these guys are running at full speed. And what happens after this hit is both of these guys experience a concussion that will alter their life. You see, we will pay billions of dollars to watch it. And what we don't realize is both those guys will go to the sideline, and we think they're making all this money, and this concussion will alter the course of their life, possibly, or an injury. Next image, real or unreal? Look how real it looks, honestly. Look how real it looks. But see, on the video game, nobody gets hurt. Like, there is no concussion. We can play it, and it's unreal, but it seems so real, and we get so into it. Next image, real or unreal? Yes, they can dance. Real or unreal? Next image. Now, I know some of you, when you play this game, you think that you could really dance. It's unreal, all right? I'm just telling you. But here's the reality that I'm getting at, you guys. And this is exactly what our culture does that's so easy to buy into, is that we can look out in the world and we can experience things every day that seem real, that feel real, but they're not necessarily really real. They're not the fullness of truth. They're sort of half-truths. They're sort of a taste of truth. And we just kind of continue to buy into them or think, oh, it's okay, or I'll just kind of do this or that, but it's no big deal. And we experience this in our culture every day, where the culture is constantly just kind of putting things in front of us that aren't true. They're sort of half-truths. They're sort of counterfeit of truth. They're small things that sort of like, oh, that's not that bad. I mean, how many times in your life have you said, oh, it's not that bad? Or that's okay. That won't hurt anyone. Oh, I can do it. It's not going to bother anyone. No one will know. And we constantly, in small ways, begin to take bite of these things that seem true, but they're not really the fullness of truth. It's a counterfeit. And this is what's happening in our culture today. It's called relativism. And relativism is the idea that there's no absolute truth, that there's no universal truth that exists. So they're saying that things that are relative is like there's no truth, that ultimately like this doesn't exist or this does, but you can believe what you want to believe. Relativism just sort of saying you can define truth for yourself. Now imagine that if all of us in this room, all 2,000 and something of us said, I'm going to define truth for myself. You define truth, I define truth, and it's just all relative. This is called subjective truth. Is that truth is whatever I believe. Now what happens, you guys, if you or you or you or me or you decide what's true, and the other person says, well, I don't think it's true, I think this is true. And so all of us in this room, we define our own truth. I mean, at some point, doesn't truth have to exist? I mean, if I were to bring you up on stage and I said, here, I want you to face backwards, and I'm going to tell you that gravity doesn't exist. I'm going to say to you, I don't believe in gravity. I don't believe gravity exists. So what I want you to do is I want you to fall backwards because gravity doesn't exist. You'd be like, Paul, that's crazy because I know gravity exists, so I'm not going to fall back. And I'm like, well, it doesn't. Try it. Well, no matter what you do or what I do to convince you that gravity doesn't exist, it still does. And this is objective truth. It's the reality that truth is based on an object, that eventually truth has to settle into something, that truth has to exist. It can't just be relative. You can't just make up truth, and I can't just make up truth, and you can't just define it how you want. That ultimately it has to boil down, and truth has to exist. It has to be based on something. I'm real. You're real. How do you know it? Because you're right there. I'm right here. Gravity exists. The sun is there. The moon exists. Truth ultimately can't be defined just by whatever you think or believe or want to think, or what makes you or I feel good in the moment. And this is the issue, you guys, that we are experiencing in our culture of relativism, because this is the effect that it's having on it. Basically, it's saying that sex has no meaning, that you can do whatever you want, when you want, and how you want with your body. And there's no consequences to your actions. That you can just do whatever you want. But the culture doesn't tell you that your body has meaning. It has a purpose. That every part of your body has a purpose and a meaning. They're like, oh no, just do whatever you want, whatever feels good. Now, could you imagine if we just did whatever felt good in the moment? I mean, we're not animals. We're human beings with a soul. We have the ability to make decisions, to choose truth, to choose what is right, to choose what is good. But if we just said, I'm going to do whatever I want, when I want, and how I want to do it with no consequences, and that's what the culture is telling us. But there's this thing called the natural law. If you guys can get a close-up, I don't know if you can see what this is. This is a pretzel stick. It's a pretzel that's a stick. It's not a stick, it's a pretzel. So if I had my small child, who at the time was 1 year old, 2 years old, and I put the pretzel stick on the floor, and I said, come get it, like a little puppy. And they crawled over and they looked at the pretzel stick. And the child picked up the pretzel stick. They would look at it. What would they do with it? Where does the pretzel stick go? In the mouth. You eat it. I didn't even have to explain it. I didn't even have to say, look, it's a pretzel, it's food. You put it in your mouth, not in your ear hole, not in your nose hole. I didn't have to even explain that. It's the natural law of how God created things. You know this is a pretzel stick, it goes in your mouth. I mean, it's that simple. And all of you, every one of you can know naturally the way God created you that you're meant for something greater. That everything that is a part of your life, every part of your body is meant and oriented towards something that God created. It has a purpose. So when someone says, I'm really confused whether or not I'm male or female, it's not funny because God created us male and female uniquely within his image with certain body parts to define who we are. And that definition, who defines God, reveals God to the world. So you as men, who you are, everything about you reveals to the world who God is because he's created you so unique. And you as females, how God created you, every part of your body has meaning. I work on a college campus, the University of Louisiana, and when you fill out an application for colleges, because I have students who come who are interested in our university, and they fill out applications, and I've looked at these applications at other universities around the country, and on applications now today, it will say, check 1, male, female, or other. Now, at what point can society create its own gender? At what point can society take what God has created that is so good and say, we no longer accept what God has created as truth, we're going to create or make our own gender? You see, you can't recreate what God already created that's good. I have a student of mine who's an engineer. He designs automobiles. He's the most creative young man I've ever seen. It completely baffles me. He can draw a car on a computer. They can take that image into the studio, and they can make a 3D, image of it, and then they take it into manufacturing, and they build the automobile out of that. And it comes out on the floor, and they created it. But if there's something wrong with it, they can go back to the drawing board and sort of keep recreating it until they get this perfect car that's aerodynamics, got everything they want. You can't recreate human life. You can't recreate what God has already created to be good and holy and amazing. You exist for a purpose. That is true. Who you are as male and female exists in you for a reason. That is true. And as society's trying to redefine everything, where they're saying, it's not really a baby yet. Yet? Yet? No, don't worry about it. There's no consequences to it. Do what you feel is right. How many women and even men have counseled who have had abortions who were told that it's not really a baby. Who, when they see it or hear the heartbeat and then experience the death, truth begins to kind of well up. Society will tell you that there's no consequences to drugs or alcohol, that faith doesn't really hold any water today. Just do what you want, when you want, how you want. But here's the reality, you guys. If you were to base your life on relative truth, on subjective realities, whatever you want to believe, eventually the foundation of your life will crumble. It'll crack. It'll fall apart. And the more and more that you and I buy in to the things of the world that sort of tempt us and saying, you know what, I don't really need to believe what faith tells me, what God tells me, I can just kind of build my own truth, that will eventually fade away. It holds no water. So faith is being attacked by the world, saying, oh, faith isn't really, something that can help your life or anything. It doesn't really matter. You see, faith is where truth exists. Truth exists in God, in relationship with God. Truth exists because God is truth. You can't separate the two. You can't say, oh, God's over here and truth is over here. No, the two are meshed together. God is truth, just like God is love. And everything that God creates, everything that God does is truth. He can't separate himself from truth. So it's for us as his children, the more and more that we lean into God, the more and more that we come into faith in Jesus Christ, the more that the truth is revealed inside of us. You guys, we are oriented for truth. It's not like God created us, put us on this earth, and is like, figure it out. Good luck. God created us in his image and likeness to be in relationship with him. And as we're in relationship with him, the fullness of God's truth is revealed to us. And the more that we walk in this relationship with God, the more that truth resides in our heart. And we could see the difference between counterfeit and real. We could see the difference between unreal and real. And our hearts are already oriented for truth, will continue to gravitate to the truth of God. I can remember being in high school, and someone told me this. I was dating a girl at the time, and someone came up to me and had this conversation with me. It sort of revolutionized my mind. At that point in my life, no one had really sat down with me and told me that premarital sex was not good. That it wasn't the fullness of God's plan for sex, that sex was meant for marriage for a reason and a purpose. I'd never heard that before. I just thought, oh, okay, well, you just do whatever you want. Like, nobody, and this person sat down with me and said, look, Paul, I got to just tell you. I got to tell you the truth. You may not believe it, you may not want to believe it, but I got to tell you the truth. And the moment that they told me the truth, my eyes were open. And I understood. It was like, whoa, of course. That makes so much sense. Of course my body is meant for this. Of course this has greater meaning than just using emotion and feelings. And it began to make sense because our hearts are oriented for God. Our hearts are oriented for truth. And when someone tells you the truth of God, when you read the truth of God, when you read scripture or the church's teaching, it begins to explode inside of you. Why? Because we're oriented for God's truth. We're created for that truth, to know that truth. And so we don't have to go out searching far away for God's truth. It's right here in scripture where Jesus says the truth will set you free. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am the truth. And my prayer today for you and I is this, is that the truth of God would begin to explode in our hearts. I'm talking about revolutionize the way that we think. Begin to revolutionize the way that we live life. Because you guys, when we live in truth, we live in freedom. When we live on God's truth, God's standards, God's principles for our life, we live in total freedom in Jesus Christ. And it's through that freedom that we're set free, that we live free. St. Augustine said this. He said, the truth is like a lion. You don't have to defend it. Let it loose, and it will defend itself. You see, truth holds water. It has substance to it. And when you let truth explode in your life, You guys, it's like a lion. It just roars inside and it begins to take over. When you allow God to just explode inside your heart and say, God, I want to know your truth. I want to know your truth for who I am as a man or a woman. I want to know your truth for my body, who you created me to be, for my sexuality. God, I want to know your truth for the future of my life, for my purpose. God, I want to know your truth for all these things. Guess what happened? God reveals it. It explodes inside of us, and it begins to set our hearts free. So every question you have, every concern you have, if you ask God to reveal truth, the fullness of God's truth will begin to explode inside of you. And when you hold God's truth up to the light against false, counterfeit teaching, God's truth will always rise up and shine forth. And my prayer today for you is that you will take seriously the reality of truth. That you would ask God to begin to just explore your heart for the fullness of truth. That truth will begin to explode in your life. That you begin to understand God's ways, God's plan for your life. That you wouldn't just sort of roam around the world, wake up every day not knowing the meaning and the purpose for why you are here. Because you have great meaning and great purpose. And when St. Augustine says, let the truth be like a lion, let it loose, it will defend ourselves. You guys, when we speak the truth out into the world, we don't have to worry whether or not it will defend, because the truth always wins over. And so as we battle as Christians in the world, as we try to defend life, as we try to defend identity, as we try to defend the fullness of truth of God, the more that we speak it out into the world, it will begin to settle and it'll make sense to people. It will defend itself, you guys. But it's for you and I to not sit back as Christians and say, I am not going to speak truth in the world. You and I as Christians are called to go out into the world and proclaim God's truth. And the way we do that is by living in the fullness of God's plan for our life, by understanding who we are in Jesus Christ, by living out our purpose, by understanding who we are, by living out our identity as man and woman, by living out our vocation as a married person, as a priest, as a religious. And when we live in the fullness of God's light and truth, it proclaims God's word to the world. And it goes out, and it settles, and it begins to build up a culture of life in the world. And you guys, today, my prayer for you and I is that the truth would not be something out there, but it would be something in here that would explode in our hearts.